One of my favorite YouTubers, John Ward, had a recent podcast where they were discussing essentially what is an American, what constitutes being an American. And I thought that was a very fascinating conversation that I wanted to basically just follow up a little bit on it. Um, they went over some resources that were easily accessible on Wikipedia, and the conversation abruptly ended. There wasn't any climax, so to speak, by the end of the conversation, which is a little upsetting, but I get it. They are limited on time and stuff, and it's mostly just to whet the palate. Um, these are questions that I actually, I think about very often. What actually constitutes being an American, and so forth. So I did kind of want to go through the resources that they had pulled up and that they were discussing on their podcast, and I'll link their podcast, the one that's being discussed, in the comments or in the description below. But this is very fascinating, these questions, and I will give you my assessment of all this at the end. But I want to kind of go through their thought process because this is how most people think about this. You'd say maybe like if you're a Republican, um, you may have a thought about what makes or constitutes an American as opposed to like a Democrat or somebody that's more left leaning might have a different concept. So there's already a bit of an issue there where there's no kind of homogeny or unification in terms of the definition of what makes an American. And if you ever had this question with your friends, you're probably going to come across similar discrepancies in terms of the definition, which is what makes an American. They went into the physiographic divisions of the contiguous United States based off of like region, and essentially the regions maybe having some kind of influence on the culture or the groups of people that would settle in that area, which is a very fascinating conversation to have. It kind of leads into other points such as is crime a factor of the environment that you're in, or is it potentially something else? Is it mental illness, or is it a combination of things where environment may not even be considered? Um, Such as if you put somebody who doesn't belong in a particular climate, or their genetic disposition rejects that climate. I don't want to go into very specific of what I'm trying to say, but let's say you take somebody who their genetic disposition doesn't favor the cold, and you put them in the cold. What's that going to do for them? Their health, their mental state, etc. Are they going to commit crimes as a result of that? Um, that's a side tangent, not necessarily important for this, but it's something interesting to think about when you're thinking about the demographics, the different types of people that exist in different parts of the country. Because you could see, um, like when you're in California or compared to like the Midwest, there are different groups of people, and sometimes they can be drawn very overtly in racial lines, right? Um, so that's something interesting to think about. Does being an American mean, a particular race, or does it mean a particular ethnicity? Because that's debatable, and I would say that's actually um, an incorrect way of looking at it. But again, looking at this from those points of view, if you're looking at the Constitution of what makes up America or being an American based off of racial or ethnic background, you're looking at it from the wrong perspective because you could be a white person in America, a black person in America, Mexican, Chinese, whatever. You'd still be American so long as there is some foundational underlying element that ties everybody together, right? Now, the question is, what is that thing? Okay, so I don't think you're going to get it in this first resource. So, what about the demographic history? So, if you take a look at the demographic history over time, what would you say uh, would constitute American? Because you'd be looking at it from who actually made up the building blocks, who built America from the ground up, right? Um, that is an approach. You could look at it from that point of view. Uh, but then you're going to run into some issues. Okay, so you have the U.S. history population, immigrants before 1790 versus after. And then you can see here kind of a breakdown, which this right here is very weird, that they're adding a religious group in terms of a ethnic uh, subset of people that constitute the people who settled here, right? Um, I am thinking about making a separate video about this, as this is clearly not an ethnic group, and it's a political tool used to justify the existence of a state called Israel, which is a satellite state or a colony. Um, well, I'll get into that more in the future. I'm not going to talk about it in this video. So there's a subset, and the subset constitutes of mostly white. Okay, now is that in dispute? No. Is that an issue? Not even slightly. But that's basically like when you take a look here, you could say these are uh, people who you would associate with an origination from Northern Europe. Okay, so that's interesting, right? If you were, and I don't have the list here because this is strictly looking at the United States, if you're looking at the demographic that mostly consists or of ethnic groups that make up, like let's say Mexico, for example, you would have Europeans as well, but they're Europeans that come from the, like, I guess the southern part of Europe, so Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, etc. You do also have Germans and you have Irish in Mexico, but I would say in terms of population, it's probably less. Now, that does speak to the original point where you have physiographic divisions where people of particular ethnic backgrounds favor certain regions, and it could contribute to their nature and their behavior. And if you extrapolate that even further, abstract further, it reflects a culture uh, that is being developed in those areas, right? So now, if we take a look at this from the demographic of people who came into the United States, originally settled here, that eventually developed a culture, right, based off of the region that they, as a group of people, settled in. Do you define an American based off of culture, shared culture? Because we don't have a homogenized culture, so you have a problem there again. So you can't define it based off of race. You can't define it based off of ethnicity. You can't define it based off of culture. So then what? What do you do? Um, I am done with these two resources, so now we're going to look at the actual map of the United States. So this gets really fascinating. And I actually, to get the answer to this, you have to look at history, and it's earlier history. It's not history of the United States. It's history that's going to come from actually Europe. Okay, so this idea of nation, can you define an American based off of a nationality? The answer to that, if you I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to really think about that before I give you the answer. If you're listening to this at 2 times speed, then you only had 2.5 seconds. So I'm going to say now, no, there is no homogenized nationality in the United States. And to go even further than that, nationality is completely made up. It's fictitious, it's false, and it's used again as a political weapon. Nationality actually arose uh, from the Treaty of Westphalia, which was a way of kind of unifying a group of people in sort of ethnic lines uh, to kind of give more power to, or sorry, distribute the power of the individual along an identity. So why that doesn't work in the United States is because there is no shared identity. You could say that you're an American, but that's not a shared identity, because then you could say what kind of American, right? Native American, African American, Mexican American. Mexican American is a very interesting way of of describing your nationality, right? Because Mexico, or being a Mexican, is a nationality. It's not an ethnic group. Um, so that's very bizarre, but people still claim that. Native American is also very bizarre, because where do you come from? Are you the Ket people that migrated from Russia, uh, uh, or the migrated from ancient Siberia down to essentially where Arizona and Texas and New Mexico are to be a Navajo? Or are you Apache, or are you some other variant? Are you Aztec? So that's where the question kind of gets a little muddied. And again, it's political. Most of this is political. So the idea of nationality is a way of describing people or providing a nationality to people. And this actually arose, which is very fascinating, through the um, Protestant Reformation. So some of this might not be clear to people, but you could think of Protestants as being proto-liberal, or what started the movement of liberalism, which is exactly what the United States was founded on. It's founded on liberal ideology. Um, and I'm not talking about the toxic, polluted version of liberalism that we have today, which people conflate liberalism and leftism. They're actually two different things, but um, uh, Protestantism is what gave birth to essentially the ideas um, that the United States Constitution was built on. Another thing that the United States was founded off of or built off of was federalization, which is similar to how Rome ruled. They federalized certain parts of or various kingdoms. They had to pay a tax back to Rome in exchange for support um, and resources, etc., their legal system, so on and so forth. So in the United States, the idea of creating federalization or a federalized republic came from this combination of Protestantism and Roman federalization. This is really fascinating because this setup was different than what was being set up in Mexico and South America, because in South America they used Catholicism, not Protestantism. So this is something that, again, if you're asking yourself what is an American, you have to consider all these almost disparate pieces of information, connect them when there is no road to connect these, so to speak, except all roads do lead back to Rome, right? So now we are trying to understand this idea of nationality. Nationality is uh, just on a very simple way of describing it. It is uh, it is identity. So creating a shared identity. This was not necessary prior, when the Roman Empire was in its heyday, so to speak, because people identified themselves as being a citizen. Okay, now the nationality of an American is subjective, and it's actually, you have small cultural groups, and culture and nationality are used interchangeably because people don't know the definition or the differences between the two, or where one originates and where one ends. Culture can happen within a small community of people, or it could be on a large level. You could say we have a global culture because of globalism. You could also say that people who really like cars, they have a culture to them too, like I don't know, Mustang culture or something like that. Cultures are very real, and you have a massive amount of subcultures, and then you have cultures that extend past any border. You have cultures on Reddit, you have cultures on 4chan, you have cultures on Twitter, cultures on Instagram, everywhere. People are finding their identity and where they fit. Cool. All this is great, but does it answer the question? The question is what makes up an American. And the simplest answer to provide you with is this. If you want to call yourself a Mexican American, an African American, which is the most idiotic thing to call yourself as an African American, what Africa is a continent. If you want to call yourself a French American, if you want to call yourself whatever, you're using a nationality and using a conjunction with your citizenship. So if you are an American, you hold a citizenship. You are a citizen of the United States. Similar to when you were Roman, Roman denoted citizenship. If you weren't a Roman, if you didn't have citizenship to Rome, you were a barbarian. You were an outsider. Okay? So, my answer to you is what makes an American an American. It boils down to a legal definition, and that means you have a citizenship. You are a citizen of the United States. That's it.